Good morning, Pilgrim Congregational Church, friends and guests. We are so glad that you are here with us in this space, no matter who you are or where you are on life's journey. You are welcome here, and we mean it. You could have joined any number of church streams this Sunday, and maybe you will, but we are so happy that you are spending a little bit of time with us. In this service, we have some candle lighting, some songs from our members. We have a reading from the New Testament and a sermon and then a closing song. And we are going to be doing communion together for the first time since we've sheltered in place and been meeting virtually. So just at the outset, if you have some elements in your house, something to eat, something to drink, find something if you would. It could be anything. Maybe goldfish or crackers or even soda, water, wine, whatever it is you have. We'll be celebrating communion a little bit later in this service. Before we begin, I'd like to make just a few announcements. First, it is on Wednesday, the 50th anniversary of Earth Day. Pretty awesome. So we have Earth-themed worship services for the next 3 weeks, including today. We're pretty excited, so hopefully you can be a part of that with us. On Wednesday, we're celebrating by joining the United Church of Christ as a whole denomination in planting trees. And as a denomination, we're joining other NGOs, New York government organizations, and nonprofits to plant as many trees as possible in honor of the 50th Earth Day. We have some bookmarks going out. Paula Kaler was kind enough to send out bookmarks with a children's earth prayer to all the kids in our church. So if you did not receive one in the mail this upcoming week, please contact me or Paula and let us know, and we'll make sure that a bookmark gets to you. Lastly, I would ask you if you would like to contact our office to make sure you call the office, because it is now being forwarded to Elizabeth's home, our awesome office manager. So if you call our church office, it will get through to her. If you email the church office, we will get your email. Please use that as your primary form of communication if you have business related to the church. If you want to contact Elizabeth about personal matters, feel free to contact her any other way. But that's helpful for us as staff during this time of social isolation and trying to bridge the gap between some of the distance. Okay, that's it for announcements. And now we have someone special lighting candles for us this morning. Surprise, just kidding. One more thing. I can do this because it's being recorded. We have a coffee hour every single Sunday. So if you'd like to join us, we get upwards of like 35 people or so, or even more, who log into Zoom and we can see each other's faces. Even if you're not technologically, apt, it's not your thing, give me a call on my mobile number. You should have it if you have a church directory. If not, we can get you one. I will help you get set up. Some of our members just call in on their phone. They don't bother with webcams and things like that. And if you'd like to call in and at least hear coffee hour, let me know. I take this time, not to wax eloquent about all this, but I really do feel in this time that helping folks connect meaningfully is a big part of what it means to be a pastor. So bug me, contact me, and we'll make sure that you get connected. Okay, and now for our candle lighter.
The puppies we found, a church family, and our Earth family.
Yeah, good job, bud.
2, 3, 4.
A boutique parking lot. Late last night, I heard the screen door slam, and a big yellow ticket wearing my old man. Don't it always seem to go that you don't know what you've got till it's gone? You pay paradise, put up a parking lot. Pop, 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 pop. Don't it always seem to go that you don't know what you've got till it's gone? They pay paradise, put up a parking lot. They pay paradise, put up a parking lot. They pay paradise, put up a parking lot. Why did they put up a parking lot? There it is.
Good morning, Pilgrim kids. This morning we're out in my strawberry patch. Did you know that there are good bugs and there are bugs that eat our vegetables in our vegetable gardens? Good bugs are bugs like praying mantises, ladybugs, bees, and my most pesky bug in my garden is usually aphids. Last year I lost almost all my cucumbers to aphids. So this year I decided to do something a little different because I don't like to use chemicals on my garden because I am going to eat these things, right? So I decided to plant praying mantises. Did you know praying mantises can grow in your garden? So I planted this praying mantis egg sac in, I don't know if you guys can see that, in my garden. And right now you can't see them because they're so tiny, but there are thousands of little baby praying mantises that are starting to grow and come out of this egg sac. And those praying mantises are going to get bigger, and then hopefully they'll eat all of the aphids in my garden later on in the summer. When I was thinking about that, I realized that our Mother Earth has so many systems in place to take care of itself. And one is that praying mantises eat aphids. And aphids, there's a rooster. I don't know if you guys can hear that. And aphids we don't really want in our garden. But that led me to think about, at this time when we're all at home with our siblings and our parents, things might be a little bit hard. But it's important to remember that we are all designed to help take care of ourselves and to take care of others, and to go forward into the next week and think about what you can do with your family that, instead of making a difficult situation worse, what can you do to make the situation better? Like in my garden, instead of spraying bugs with chemicals, I decided to feed the praying mantises. Good luck as you go into the next week. I hope that you are all enjoying this time to kind of sit back and play games or puzzles and keep working on doing the best and being the best that you can be.
Acts 17, verses 19 through 28. They took him, Paul, and brought him to the Areopagus, and asked him, "May we know what this new teaching is that you are presenting? It sounds rather strange to us, so we would like to know what it means." Now all the Athenians and the foreigners living there would spend their time in nothing but telling and hearing something new. Then Paul stood in front of the Areopagus and said, "Athenians, I see how extremely religious you are in every way. For as I went through the city and looked carefully at the objects of your worship, I found among them an altar with the inscription, 'To an unknown God.' What therefore you worship as unknown, This I proclaim to you, the God who made the world and everything in it, he who is Lord in heaven and earth, does not live in shrines made by human hands, nor is he served by human hands, as though he needed anything, since he himself gives to all mortals life and breath and all things. From one ancestor he made all nations to inhabit the whole earth, and he allotted the times of their existence and the boundaries of the places where they would live, so that they would search for God, and perhaps grope for him and find him, though indeed he is not far from each one of us. For in him we live and move and have our being, as even some of your own poets have said, for we too are his offspring.
I may never forgive myself for this, but I'm going to do the cheesy pastor thing and make a play on words. Focusing on the earth during these next worship services and all of creation, experiencing God in creation, can take us from having an awful time to an awe-filled time. Oh my goodness. See what I did there? Awe-filled and awful. An awe-filled encounter with the earth around us teaches us grace. It reminds us of our place and our inclusion, and it encourages us to endure. I can't think of anything more appropriate for these weeks than these things. That first part, teaching us grace, is called sacramentality. I'm going to use a bit of technical language this Sunday, but really it's very simple. Sacraments are vehicles of grace, of blessing, of love. And you may have heard that word before. Some people enumerate the sacraments. They say there's 4 or 2 or whatever. But communion is one of the sacraments. It involves, ordinary bread and ordinary wine carrying extraordinary significance. And the incarnation is like a sacrament. You have the idea that God and humanity can become one at Christmas. And through this body, through this specific person, we receive grace. And if you're sacramentally minded as a person, everything in existence, in my opinion, has this potential of delivering the goods. Because it is God in whom we all live and move and have our being, as the ancients used to say. To use their metaphor, all things, including our earth and all living things, animate and inanimate, all things exist in God. This is a spatial metaphor, but I think it's really helpful. God, all things exist within God, and God exists within all things. That's different a little bit than pantheism. If you've ever heard of the word panentheism, people throw that around quite a bit these days in theological circles. It's like panentheism, but with the en added in the middle. Pantheism with the en added in the middle. And that's the concept that God is permeating all things and all things exist within God. They may not be ontologically the same, or just like they may not be exactly the same, the creation and God, but the relationship is so intertwined that you don't get one without the other. So pantheists would say, all is God. Panentheists would say all exists within God, and the other way around. And I had Larry read from Acts 17. I have my Bible here. Just because it is so fun. It is such a fun passage. It reads almost snarky at one point, and a little bit like maybe even self-aware and critical. And I think there is a real gem of spiritual wisdom inside of Acts 17. So what we have here in this passage is the Greeks in Athens interacting with Paul, one of the early Christian thinkers in this story. And they bring him before this like debate area, the debate stage basically, to talk about his beliefs, because he's been interacting with people in the marketplace. And the text even says, kind of like, again, snarkily, you know, the Greeks didn't do anything other than just hear and talk about something new all the time. Fantastic, right? Like always talking and having theories and philosophizing. And we've carried on their tradition, actually. So if you want to join book club, we do a lot of fun with that. And so he's talking with these different philosophers, and he even quotes them. You know, he points to a statue that was made an idol for an unknown God, and Paul makes this argument, very interestingly, from his own tribe, right? Literally from the people of Israel, from the person of Jesus. He makes this argument that there is this God who is beyond our tribes, beyond our idols, beyond our houses of worship. He says God doesn't live in houses of worship, right? In the sense that God's not contained by them. And he tries to like blow it up to this universal thing, this thing that we all exist in and live and move in. Even your philosophers have said, and he quotes them, it is in God we live and move and breathe. And then he makes the claim that God shows up in the person of Jesus, or in the story of Jesus, and in the life that Jesus brings. But we blow past that kind of articulation in Acts 17 to get to the point of resurrection or particularity or Christian story. And I'd like for this season for us to just rest a little bit in that first part. So he says, it's funny, God creates this world and hopes that the nations would, you know, reach for and argue and grope and perhaps find God. And that's what they're doing together. Very fast, they're doing that together, both Paul and the Greeks. And he says, for in him we live and move and have our being, as even some of your own poets have said, for we too are his offspring. The idea that in God we all live and move and have our being, and that God is drawing us in loving desire, does manifest in particular things, at least for Paul. There's not this, universal love that exists beyond special particular things. It exists within particular parts and elements of creation, within trees and people and the world around us. And so it's helpful for me to think of the world existing within God, and then to realize that vehicle of divine grace, which is all around us, that we're all swimming in, we see it when we encounter other things. We don't just see it alone, we see it in the connection between us. Wendell Berry talks about this love being particularized in a quote I would like to share. Oh, it's on my phone, which I'm recording on right now. So Wendell Berry speaks about our love for, or our care for the planet, being not just this love that is this kind of universal and abstract thing, but it must be a care that addresses unique individual neighborhoods, both human and non-human neighborhoods and pieces of land. And that care can only bring that care out of institutions and systems and governments and churches through acts of love, through love itself, love being incarnated and expressed in individual actions and the connection between us and specific things in the world. And it's a beautiful quote. I'll share it in the link or in the description of this video, and also on our Facebook. And his point is well taken. And I think the reverse of it is true too. Just like we love people in specificity, it is from specific things and words and things in existence that we receive the grace of God. If God is love, and love is what we're all kind of swimming in and binded together by, it is in the space between, I'm not going to sing that song, the space between us and other life, us and each other, us and the rest of the universe. It's that connection between us where God resides. And it's in this relationship that we discover and that we receive grace. So, God is present in all things. If Acts 17 is true, and we get our very being and our moving from God, we can find God wherever we look. I don't think that's too controversial, but I think it's encouraging in this time that we can be in our homes, look out at our backyards, or even look at each other if we're able to stand each other for too long, and recognize that God is still present and God is still reaching out to us and offering grace. But communing with the earth and receiving this grace of God through communing with the earth involves our own inclusion. We're not separate from everything. We're a part of it. And biologists know this really well and have been trying to tell us this for a while, that our actions are interconnected with biospheres and ecology, and that nothing exists in isolation. But God is, in the space between us as well. And we've done a historically poor job as a Christian church. It probably needs to be named. That we've done a poor job of meditating on our relationship between us and our planet. Not across the board. There's always been Christian voices who have argued from even the tradition and the scriptures that we've inherited in our own theology, but have argued for the sacredness of the whole world. I believe that's where the story leads to. But we also have had a lot of people who have conceptualized God outside of the world and God being something so different that and so disconnected, that the world is this neutral thing we can act on, and that we're separate from all of life. We're somehow categorically different than the rest of life. And I believe in our worship and in connecting the idea that everything exists within God, and using things like sacramentality and panentheism, we can recover some of our own sacredness in the process. We're a part of all of this, and a sacred part of it too. And that leads to us honoring our responsibility as part of creation. That'll be a topic for the next 2 Sundays, so hopefully you can join us. And third, our wonder. That's what we're working on this Sunday. Our wonder and awe-filled encounter with the earth brings endurance. There was a moment in my life where everything kind of turned upside down, and I was having a really difficult time, and I didn't know which way was up. Some of you have gone through life transitions like that. And I had the opportunity to hike up to Lake Catherine in New Mexico. And it was a really long hike with my older brother. I remember waking up one morning, looking out at all the mountainscapes, looking at the trees and the marmots that are trying to steal our food, and realizing kind of my place in all of it in a way that was encouraging to me. I realized that even though these big things were happening to me, these mountains were still here. This forest would still be here. It was here before I was, and it will be here after me. And even something like a mountain can bring, reflecting on the earth as a whole and its history and its future, even though we have such a big part in shaping that future, even knowing that this planet will be here after us gives us endurance. I mean, to get poetic, the very blood in our body comes from the water in the ocean, and the streams and the rivers that run around us. And our bones are made up of the minerals that make up mountains. We're a part of all of this, and we can draw strength from the world around us. And we can learn in that reverence to have a little more endurance, just like streams and mountains. I wanted to share this earlier, but I feel like this is a good place to end. I keep this in my car. I do show and tell because I was a youth pastor for many years, and I can't kick the habit anymore. This is a seed made in El Salvador, and there's a group of people who cut seeds in half, and they paint paintings on the middle and sell them. And I was able to buy one. It has, if you can see, communion, bread and a cup and a dove. And it's a beautiful picture of this, like, to me, the power and the sacramental nature of all of life. It's this seed, that has been transformed, and reminds me that regardless of whether I cut them open or not, the seeds that I see and the birds and the earth around me has this power of delivering grace. And so just as much as we are going to talk about being responsible for our relationship toward the world, we're also responsible for receiving grace and wonder and endurance from what is around us. And I pray that is your experience this week as you contemplate the world around you, the God who is in between and in and through all things and binds us together in love.
Sing For the Beauty of the Earth in celebration of Earth Day today.
And now it is time for communion. So if you would join me, we're going to walk down to the creek to take communion together. And not just talk about being in the world and a part of our world and receiving the grace of all of the earth, but actually do it. And I figure this would give you time to collect some of the elements that you're going to use, whatever it is you'll be using for communion. And it gives me a little bit of time to talk about, there's a passage in Isaiah where the prophet has this vision of God sitting on the throne. It's in the mystical tradition of the prophets, and there's these servants of God who are these like angels, seraphim, and they're covering their face with wings, and they're shouting to each other constantly, "Holy, holy, holy is the Lord. The whole earth is full of God's glory." And that word that gets translated glory also means like weight or significance. And, thinking about the whole earth being filled with the weight or significance of God is exactly what we've been talking about. The sacramentality and the potential in all things to wake us up to God's love and receive grace. So we're going to take communion down here. I think it'll work. So on that night when Jesus ate his last meal with his friends, he would have said a blessing before serving them. He would have blessed God who brings forth bread from the earth and fruit from the vine. And then he would have said his blessing and his take on the Passover meal. On that night, he took the cup. I have coffee and a protein bar, but he had bread and wine, and whatever it is you take. He took the cup and he said, "This is my blood poured out for you and for many. Take and drink." He also said, taking the bread, "This is my body," a very specific vehicle of grace for God, broken for you and for many. This is the bread of life. Take and eat. And so we do together. Amen. Let us pray. God, thank you for these simple elements of bread and cup. Thank you for this earth that we inhabit, for our part in creation. We pray that you would fill us with wonder again at the things we see each day, and that your Spirit would give us endurance for the days to come. Amen.